Hi NB fam, how's everyone doing? This is a different video. I've decided to add a little bit of a book review, and man, this is a lot of footage. I was out for a ride today that turned into sort of just doing my chores on the bike, but it was a pretty day, so I thought I'd bring the GoPro along. You'll notice, if you follow the channel, this footage is still very compressed looking, and that's because this is still the GoPro 2. And I'm waiting for the 8 to arrive, but we're in the middle of pandemonium. It was due here about a week ago, and it never showed up, so I'm not sure what the deal is with that. The book I'm reading right now is the new Stephen King book, and it's called If It Bleeds, but it's basically a collection of 4 novellas. It's kind of like, what was the other one he did? 4 Seasons with the Body in it, or different seasons, I guess. But this one is quite good. There are a couple. I'm not going to talk about the plot necessarily, other than the eponymous. Is that how you say it? If It Bleeds is a novella that follows Holly Gibney of the Mr. Mercedes series and The Outsider, and it's really good. It's very interesting. Great book. Before I get into my thoughts on the book, though, I'll do some fitness check-in. It hasn't been going great, to be honest. I was really motivated, but I stopped seeing the weight come off, and I've just been kind of stalled out. I was 247.6 when I weighed in yesterday. Didn't weigh in today. I just want to lose it, but I just don't seem to have the ability to not eat snacks when I'm feeling stressed. And let's face it, these can be somewhat stressful times. They're certainly different times. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. I suddenly am not as worried about going totally broke and losing all my possessions, because they ultimately are meaningless. I don't know if you ever read Walden. It's kind of an odd. This channel is generally motorcycles and me trying to lose weight. That's mostly what this is about. But I'm going to talk about books today because that's what's on my mind. I think it was Thoreau who said that we don't own our possessions, they own us. I don't always agree with that. I find a lot of our stuff is tools, and like motorcycles are tools to help us relax and enjoy ourselves. They're for transportation, obviously. But I got a car. I mean, I could get around in my truck if I had to. I can't right now because the wheel fell off after I had the tires changed. But normally, I could just hum around in the truck. But the purpose of the motorcycle, to me, is I find it relaxing and enjoyable. So I'm not sure that possession owns me. But this one I'm riding today, the 2010 Harley-Davidson Road King Classic, maybe it does kind of own me. Maybe my possession owns me, in the sense that this was my dad's bike and I can't part with it. If I didn't have the space to put it somewhere, I don't know what the hell I would do. So I guess he had a point, Anyway, so the new Stephen King book, If It Bleeds. I'm a fan. I'm generally very, very neutral in terms of politics. Canadian politics are obviously a little different than American politics. And Stephen King, in person, like on his social media and stuff, he's a little political for me. I find that he really jumps down the throat of everyone who voted for Trump, and without really trying to understand why people voted for Trump, other than he just accused, they must be racist, or they must be this or that or the other thing. But being on the other side of it, where you're worried about money and you're worried about your family's future and stuff, I can understand why people would vote for lower taxes. Maybe it's hard for him to relate because he's worth $1 billion or something like that. But, I'm not saying I would have voted one way or the other, but I do find he is a little bit, I don't want to say insufferable, because he's also very funny, but just following Stephen King on his socials, I don't know. I feel like he's more insightful as an author than as a political pundit. You know what I mean? But then, of course, I'm going into that with my bias of always, it's always best to try and understand the other side. Like, I severely dislike our federal government in Canada, but I have voted across a spectrum before. I dislike them because, they've gone after my family, they've made life harder. I feel like there are some elements that are a little bit reminiscent of soft dictatorship going on in the Prime Minister's office. But I can understand why people voted for him, even if I don't feel the same way. You know what I mean? So I think if we all just try to understand the other side and not be, maybe not be as divisive. Division is a great political tool to, cast blame for everything that's wrong on a different subset of society than the people who vote for you, and B, to take away your money and your freedom and then blame other people for it. So, just don't fall for it. I mean, look, these are words of wisdom from yours truly, but I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around for. I don't know how many people actually watch these videos, but there you go. Those are my words of wisdom. Don't let people divide you, especially politicians. They have an interest in making you hate each other. Don't fall for it. Before 24/7 news cycles and before social media and all that stuff, I don't remember disliking people who were politically different than me. But they get so aggressive, right? So, some people do, not everybody. But then we lump that group together. And the division buys votes at the expense of what our society is supposed to be all about. We're all supposed to be kind and understanding. Okay? That... There's your motorcycle and fitness video for today. Next, I'm going to talk about the book. So, despite Stephen King being a little bit divisive in his socials, I really like him as a writer. My dad loved him. I love him. I've read everything, except I think I didn't read Eyes of the Dragon. I'm not really into the fantasy stuff, but even though I'm not into the fantasy stuff, I did read the entire Dark Tower series. And I listen, like right now, as I'm riding, I'm listening to the audiobook of If It Bleeds. A little word of warning here. When you're listening to an audiobook on a motorcycle, just remember to always make the time to be extra cautious. Don't drive fast. Don't drive recklessly, because your mind is half on the book and half on the road. And the same goes in a car, only when you're on a motorcycle, if you bump into somebody, you can bust your leg, right? So, just... I don't think that you should necessarily not listen to audiobooks, not listen to music. Do what makes you happy, but just keep yourself in the zone, because you still have to drive defensively, especially this time of year. Just assume everyone's trying to kill you, and you'll be fine. If It Bleeds, so the first story, oh my gosh, it was so good. It was classic Stephen King. It reminded me a little bit of which was a short story I think he wrote for the Kindle when it first came out, and it was kind of about an alternate universe through the Kindle. This one's not one of those alternate universe stories, but it is about technology. It's kind of about the first iPhone, and it's a sweet story about a young guy who gets hired to read for an old rich man. Anyway, I won't give away the plot, but it was just like classic Stephen King, really, really good. The second story is going to be the one that everyone sort of remembers this book for, and even though I almost skipped it, it was so dark. So he wrote it obviously before coronavirus and the pandemic and everything else that's happened. But it's based on Blades of Grass, or Leaves of Grass, the Walt Whitman book. And I haven't thought about Walt Whitman since I was in college. I did do some college English, even though I did a science degree. I've always loved English and creative writing and that kind of thing. I do some writing as well. But there's this section in the Song of Myself, where Whitman says, "The past and present wilt, I have filled them, emptied them, and proceed to fill my next fold of the future. Listener up there, what have you to confide to me? Look in my face while I snuff the sidle of evening. Talk honestly, no one else hears you, and I stay only a minute longer. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes. Alright, so I contain multitudes is like the famous, I think Bob Dylan wrote a song called that later, but it's like Walt Whitman's most famous line, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's been some time. I found poetry, even though I've written some, I find it hit or miss for me to be able to relate to it. But that line, I remember it, and I remember it striking me. I am large, I contain multitudes. And when we studied it in English class, I think, if you haven't read this one, by the way, everybody should probably give it a read. It is kind of like capturing the American experience, at least at that time. I think when we interpreted it, we said, one person can be full of various different opinions. You're not committed. It's not black and white. You're not a character in a novel. You're not a tool of a plot. You have infinite malleability. You can change your opinion. You can hold two opposing opinions at the same time. That's even though if you were trying to analyze it, that doesn't make sense. Obviously, lots of people do. And it isn't necessarily a bad thing. That was sort of what we considered. But King talks about an old African proverb as well that says, when an old man dies, a library burns. And that second story in the novella is, or the second novella in the book is really good in terms of sort of making you think. It's a think piece, Stephen King, he gets underappreciated. I think we write him off maybe not quite as pulp fiction, but as horror fiction or something to that effect. He does use, I will admit, as somebody who's written books, and there are some things that he's written that I'd be a little bit ashamed to use, and he's a trillion times better writer than I am, but he uses plot devices that are obvious, and it's like the Deus Ex Machina plot device, right? Like, why did this happen? Oh, because I had to get to the next chapter. And when you're writing in horror and you're using ghosts, and hell, Shakespeare did it too, right? So I just think it's a little bit transparent, but at the same time, man, he is incredibly entertaining. And his language is, like his prose is not particularly flowery, but his character descriptions are absolutely incredible. Nobody else does it better. Nobody puts you in a story better than Stephen King. So I think he gets sort of underappreciated as maybe the best, dare I say, the best author of all time, the best writer of all time. We study Shakespeare, and Shakespeare was for the masses back in the day. I don't know that they all went around talking in iambic pentameter, but people got it. They got, horny teenagers, Romeo and Juliet. It had broad appeal. It wasn't really brainy at the time. It's hard for us to study it because we don't speak the same language. We speak it, but it's, obviously language has evolved. My words elude me. But I think 100 years from now, 200 years from now, we're going to be looking at the works of Stephen King. Not we'll all be dead. But whoever is teaching English at that time, assuming the universities haven't turned into drone factories, which they're on their way to, as an aside, they shouldn't teach you what to think. They should just teach you how to think. All that aside, I think we will look back at Stephen King's works and he will be the William Shakespeare of our time. So if you haven't been reading Stephen King, read it. Even his old stuff that's just cheesy, that's pure pulp fiction, is well written. It's a great way to learn how to write about characters if you're interested in writing. I'm just pulling in I was putting motor oil in the Honda. I had to check the oil. I got paranoid. I had a nightmare last night that it was out of oil, and sure enough, I got there and it was down a quart, so I added a quart of oil. I tried to cut out as much baloney from this video as I could, but it's still terribly long. So I will do some more trimming. Anyway, so that's my piece about that second part of the book. So, right. He took, I was saying, I always thought that I Contain Multitudes line was talking about like multitudes of opinions, multitudes of different forms of yourself. But King takes it more literally. I don't want to give away the plot of the book, but it's another interesting way of looking at it, actually. You kind of, especially as a writer, okay, I've written a lot of characters, I've written... and again, I'm not a great writer. If you would like a copy of the book that I wrote, one of the many books I wrote, send me a line. Tell me what kind of stories you're interested in. I added an extra syllable there, and I will. I'll try to hook you up. There's not a lot to do right now, so reading might be to your advantage. I might make them free Kindle books. I don't know. It's really, really hard to get published as a writer in New Brunswick. I will say that. New Brunswick has many good points, one of them being that there aren't a lot of cases of coronavirus, and that we have some freedoms that a lot of places don't have right now because we clamped down hard and fast and pulled together quite well as a team. But there are a lot of downsides too, especially if you're ambitious. And writing, I've won some awards for writing, but you just can't. It might be the Canadian writing experience. You cannot get published unless you're from a certain background that is going to help the publisher. I don't mean to sound bitter about this, but it's going to help them get a grant. I have looked at trying to find an agent, but man, I'm like, as you know, I'm working in medicine. I'm really busy. And people just don't seem interested. They want people of that certain background that, and this isn't a racial thing. I'm talking background like they want a rags to riches story, or everyone's looking for like American Idol kind of drama when they're looking for an author. And I was never in rags. I had a happy middle class upbringing, and now I'm a doctor, and I until recently made a good income. But that doesn't mean I can't write. And some of my books I'm quite proud of. So if anyone would like one, just put something in the comments below and we'll figure out how to get in touch. In the meantime, I might put them out on the Kindle. I would like people to read the stuff I've written. I'm always worried I'm going to beef it on the motorcycle and all this stuff I've written is never going to get out. But anyway, that's what King was talking about. When he read that line, I Contain Multitudes, he is physically, he's talking about all the characters, all the interpretation of other people that live in your brain are in essence their own universe. And man, it was a good it was a mind trip. It was so goddamn dark, but having just lost my dad young, he had pancreatic cancer. Cancer plays a part in the book, and it's sad, man. It was a fucking difficult, pardon my French, difficult story to read. But it's kind of funny. I'm on Dad's bike wearing Dad's watch. I feel like I'm just riding with my dad today. Anyway, so yeah, it's really hard to explain that second part of the novella, but it was good. The third part is the part that I'm just finishing now, and it is again the Holly Gibney, Mr. Mercedes continuation, and it's called If It Bleeds, based on that line, if it bleeds, it leads. And it's excellent. And again, it might be considered a little bit more pulp fiction-y. Again, this is where he uses those supernatural devices to move the plot along that you're just kind of, I don't know. I'm not always thrilled when he does that because it seems kind of silly, but at the same time, great story, great characters. You're really invested in it. Part of that one is about the contagious nature of evil, and I think that is something that I've often pondered. We like to blame things for horrifying events, but you wonder if, say you didn't have the news, say nobody was reporting things like Columbine and the Parkland shooting and stuff, would that worm still get into people's heads that for whatever reason convinces them to do something horrific? I don't know if it's like a contest to them. I don't know. I've never understood it, but I've always wondered that if it wasn't for social media, for the constant 24/7 news cycles, would these maniacs, would they ever catch that evil worm, or would they just go on to, I don't know, shoot themselves, or just be like 50s era psychopaths? We all grew up with assholes. We all grew up with people that are probably psychopathic in some sense. What is it that turns them into such monsters, and why is it happening more frequently now? And it's so easy to say, oh, it's because of whatever, guns or video games or what have you. But is it just because they're aware of one another? Is it because of is our raising awareness of these horrifying events and almost glorifying it in a way and giving it such a huge presence in the national spotlight, is that sort of helping the bug continue to spread? This is the Foster Thurston. This is the road I was telling you about in the last video. So I was going up to the Harley dealership just in order to bring them a oil filter, because stupidly, well, there's no service available anywhere else. I was nervous to do my own oil change. This is embarrassing. I also had to okay, in fairness, the ZRX 1100, I'm dying to get out for a ride on it. I'm really dying to ride it. I love that bike. But it needed a new rear tire, and at the same time it needed new oil and an oil filter. And I was nervous to do it myself, and I can't do the rear tire. So I brought them the oil filter because they didn't have the right size one. I don't know why I took it to a Harley dealership. I guess I hate money or something. It's going to be expensive. And like the new tire was $300. Jeez, don't tell Chrissy. Yeah, I had an idea. You know what? We'll go through the twisties here. I don't have a lot more to say. It is sort of a beautiful ride, and maybe we'll just cut it off when we cross the bridge to go to West Saint John. I tried to cut out some stop signs and stuff, but this gave me an interesting thought, I guess. When I was riding, Road King Classic 2009, this is not a sports bike, but I find this just as fun to ride on this road as pretty much any other bike that I have. I just go slower, and it feels like you're pushing the bike to its limits. This part isn't particularly twisty. You don't get a sense of the hills. It's kind of a shame, but this is a beautiful road in the summer. Now, there are always deer on it. That's an issue. But in the winter, it just ices up so fast. It's really, it becomes necessary to have four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive in the winter if you work at the hospital. This is the road to the Saint John Regional. And you have to, as a patient, you still have to be able to drive there, but you don't have to be able to drive there fast unless you're really sick, take an ambulance. But as a physician, sometimes there's like an acute emergency, and I'm doing this road as quickly as I can, which is lots of fun, but when it's icy, you really do need all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. I have an F-150. I don't know if you've ever seen the truck. An F-150 with 3 normal wheels and 1 steel undersized wheel, thanks to the local tire place. But yeah, you can see, the road conditions terrible, but that's all right. What I'll do as we're doing this ride, I think I'll just cut out a bunch of the middle part that's not as pretty. Anyway, I've given my thoughts on the Stephen King book, so there you go. A little book review for everyone. Pick it up, have a look at it. If there are any authors that you've read that maybe haven't gotten as much coverage that could use a shout out, put them down below. If you'd like to start a motorcycle book club, I read about a book a week. Maybe we can do more book reviews. Hospital's coming up on your right here. That's the golf course on our left. I think it just opened. There are a couple of, we've actually passed a couple golf courses on this ride. So normally, I'd be turning right here. It's very pretty. On the far side of the hospital, there's a running track from an old Canada Games. I think it was like the 1987 Canada Games or something. It's part of the UNB, so University of New Brunswick is to your right as well. It's part of their campus, and I love going there to walk, but they haven't opened it up. I don't understand. I'm like, man, it's never crowded. There's at the most 3 people there on this huge track and field place. It's not like as soon as you open it up, the students are all going to have a soccer tournament. Nobody's there. Open it up, for God's sake, so we can go for a walk. This place, that's a garden center on the right, and I think it's owned by one of the cardiologists. And then if you turn left there's more of a twisty, windy road, but the roads were a little bit sandy still. They're not going to clean them this year, I don't think. So I think when I get to the next light, what I'll do is we'll just edit out a whole chunk of video. It's not a real pretty drive, this part. I really wish when the trees come in, when it's all beautiful and green. Oh man, New Brunswick is... I can't believe it's May 11th and it's still... But look, frankly, there was snow on the ground yesterday when we woke up. There was 3 or 4 inches of snow. So we were lucky to get a good day today. But I just can't believe there aren't any leaves on the trees on May 11th. Usually this is, early summer by now. But it's just been cold spring. It's kind of a bummer because everyone's stuck inside anyway. But New Brunswick is, if you have the chance to travel to the East Coast, especially East Coast Canada, definitely do it. If you're going on a motorcycle, just take it slow. Don't ride too fast here. Not that the police are all friendly and everything. It's the road conditions are unpredictable, often quite bad, and there's a lot of wildlife, especially since the pandemic. I don't know if maybe, did it interfere with hunting season? I don't think so. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Let's check out something else. All right, so just turn in here. This is kind of a weird little swoopy way of getting onto the highway, going northwest, I guess. But I needed to go to West Saint John, so I almost missed this exit. It was I kind of forgot. I forgot how to do this. So if I'd kept going straight, there's this new arterial that goes to Bayside Drive, which is... Saint John is a huge city, like physically enormous. I think it's the oldest city in North America. I don't know. It might be, by landmass, the second biggest city in Canada after Toronto. I can't remember. It's huge though, and it stretches in every direction almost endlessly. So if we'd gone out past the oil refinery along Bayside Drive, you can get out. There's some beautiful road out that way that goes along Mispec, and the gun club is out there, the Fundy Shooting Sports Club, that kind of thing. But the roads are, you can see these roads are in bad condition, and these were just worked on. But those ones are even worse. It is annoying watching the bridge, the footage from the bridge, because I'm wearing a chest harness with a GoPro on it instead of a helmet mount. And it's just kind of a shame. It's a beautiful view, but you mostly just see the concrete barriers. There was a famous artist named Miller Britton who threw himself over this bridge. I mean, that he died. That was how he died. The pulp and paper mill, I think it's called Irving Pulp and Paper, is right down here. Sorry, I didn't mute my phone. Obviously, this is very formal ride-along video. Moto vlog. I'm trying to figure out what keywords to put in on YouTube so people can find these. I think this one I'm going to put book review. Nobody... It'd be ridiculous. It is a ridiculous channel. I started watching regular car reviews again because he does some motorcycle stuff. I love cars too. I will do some car stuff later on. I could have called this regular motorcycle reviews and people would have all subscribed and been like, oh, he's doing more, and then they'd be disappointed when they found out it wasn't the humorous narrator of regular car reviews. It was a boring guy quoting Walt Whitman. Anyway, let's skip ahead a little bit more because you guys have already seen this. This is just West Saint John. If you go back to the other videos, you can see more of this. Alright, here we are leaving the Harley-Davidson dealership on the west side. We get those nice views coming across the bridge. On the way back, I think it is a little bit better. There was a little bit of a close call here where I had to jam on the brakes pretty hard. It was coming into a merge lane and the light changed for the cars, let me think, the cars turning left to get onto the highway. It's all up here a little ways. But one guy just gunned it out of the light, and initially, this is why you always double check. Initially, I definitely thought I had enough room to merge ahead of him, and it's it's on quite an angle, like you're taking quite a sharp turn because it's like a cloverleaf type highway on-ramp. And then I did my double check, and the guy was right on me, so I kind of had to slam on the brakes. It worked fine. Thankfully, it wasn't a real dirty part of the road, but it definitely, if I hadn't done the double check, it probably would have ended up with some trouble. I don't know if I would have gotten hit, but somebody would have had to take emergency action. Sad that's Cox Electronics. It was a staple. That was where you went to buy televisions and AV receivers and stuff. It was a home theater staple, and they had some really high-end stuff as well as just your standard sort of Marantz and Sony and whatever. But out of business. I remember going there with my dad when I was a kid. So yeah, not right here, but right at the next turn. Look how terrible the road is. So the other day I was on the Honda CB750, like a 1978 bike, and I was able to avoid all these potholes. Not a chance on the Road King. If you're wondering what the handling differences are, this thing weighs a ton. The Honda is no lightweight, but this thing weighs a ton. Okay, watch this. So, looks like I should be able to merge. Nobody's coming. Then watch this dude turning on. Oh, you hear the brakes. That guy. I don't know what... I don't complain about other drivers generally because I'm not the world's most attentive driver either, especially in a car. But, he just kind of surprised me, I guess. It was not that he did anything wrong. But always double check. Man, look, I see the carnage all the time, right? That's my job. and I still ride a motorcycle, but I ride cruisers. I wear full gear. Screw it. I mean, I'm not wearing the unitard with the leather and the big thick knees and like the Alpine Stars boots up to my high calf. But I'm wearing boots. Man, I used to wear sneakers. I will admit, I used to wear sneakers. And then one day, even though I was wearing boots, I dumped my Superglide Custom. And these were motorcycle boots, but the gear shift lever just caught me the wrong way and went through the boot between the sole and the leather and under the arch of my foot. It didn't hurt me. But I said I'm wearing boots from now on. If I'd had sneakers on, I might have broken my ankle or really hurt my foot. Once in a while, I'll putt around in our neighborhood with sneakers. But look, here's a question for you. I don't necessarily think that motorcycle boots are any better than other boots. I like the ones I'm wearing today have armor, just because I knew I was doing a longer drive. They have armored ankles. You're maybe less likely to get road rash and stuff, but they're not going to keep you from having your leg ripped off, frankly. So just drive safe. This is coming up over the Harbor Bridge in the opposite direction. I'm hoping, yeah, there's downtown Saint John on your right. Man, it's such a nice city. When it's sunny, it's so beautiful here. I kind of talk up the area a lot. It has its downsides, but they're all economic and and policy based. The upsides are, I mean, this is a refinery city, right? It's an industrial town, and it is still so beautiful. And this is just a piece of New Brunswick, man. Okay, so if you were coming here, what would I do if I'd never been? I would probably do downtown Saint John, like do the city market, see it. If you're on a bike, drive out east from Saint John. Go to the Kingston Peninsula, go to the farmers market there, drive around Hampton, Sussex, Hammond River Road, and then go to Moncton, Shediac area. Shediac in the summer, it's like it's old school. It's like American graffiti kind of. People just bum around, ride their bikes. Lots of cool cars to see. A little greasier, maybe a little bit more boganish, my brother would say, but it's a fun place to be in the summer. I'm dying to go up, but nothing's happening this year. Everything's closed. You're not missing a whole lot. Yeah. So the rest of the video is just driving along the highway. I think we got. This bike is nice. It cruises just at 120 kilometers an hour. So our highway speed limit's 110. I don't know. Everyone seems to drive 10 kilometers an hour over the speed limit. I'm usually okay with that. But it's just comfortable. I find my Super Glide Custom at 120, there's a lot of wind buffeting. This was a windy day, but this bike was solid. No issues at all. I did get a windshield extender for it. Oh, and after I got home from this ride, my mail showed up, and the little bar for the ram mount thing that connects to your handlebars came. So I'm going to mount it on this bike, because I figure if I'm doing a long trip and I need a GPS, it's going to be on this bike, more likely than not. And I'm excited about it. I'm going to try that out. I really hope the Hero 8 comes, because I'd love to do some more scenic rides and show you around a bit more of New Brunswick. Anyway, I guess we'll part ways here. There's not much else to see on the highway. And yeah, thanks for sticking it out. This is a long friggin' video. If anybody listened to it the whole way through, congratulations, you're as boring as I am. But yeah, I'll let you hear the bike a little bit just as we close, and then see you later. You can mostly hear the wind, as you know. Okay, see you next time.